Are you a farmer or a cowboy? Now, before you answer that question, let me explain a little bit more. I've been working on this book about ambient music, and I came across this quote from Brian Eno that has just stuck with me, and I think about it almost every day. He basically makes the argument that artists can fit into two different categories. There are the farmers, those who cultivate something, cultivate an idea, a sound, an aesthetic, always pulling some new inspiration from the same ground. And then there are the cowboys, and the cowboys are, always off to a new frontier, exploring, off having adventures, finding new things. When I first heard that quote, I thought, of course I want to be a cowboy. Like cowboys are just objectively cooler. Trying new things, doing new stuff, having adventures, that sounds amazing. And the idea of just constantly finding something new, I love that. But then I started thinking about it more, and I think the farmer is actually underrated. Just speaking for myself, I kind of equated the farmer with being boring, just on the same farm every day, doing the same chores, the same monotonous lifestyle. And one, farmers are much more badass than we give them credit for. Being a farmer is hard work. The idea is cultivating, constantly finding something new from the same place. And as I kept thinking about this idea, I started honing in on three what I want to call artistic farmers. Artists who find new things to do or say within the same land, the same space that they're always working in. The first one was Pusha T.
Ballers, I put numbers on the boards. Hard to get a handle on his double-edged sword.
Pusha T, of course, is one half of the rap group Clips, an amazing solo career. And Push also loves to rap about the same thing a lot, which is coke, cocaine, bricks of cocaine. Of course, if you listen to his music, you'll hear this all again and again. He talks about his coming up with his brother selling cocaine, and it's just part of his lore, his origin story. And you could say that maybe this would get tired after what, 20, 30 years now of rapping about this. But what always impresses me about Push is that it never feels old. Yeah, he talks about the same subject a lot, and I want to be clear, it's not the only thing he ever talks about. The fact that he can make it sound fresh, new metaphors, new imagery. When he said, I'm the L. Ron Hubbard of the cupboard,
I'm the L. Ron Hubbard of the cupboard. To some certain motherfuckers, gotta love it.
amazing. Pulitzer worthy. Another person I thought about this with recently was Jesse Eisenberg. I just watched his movie A Real Pain recently, which he directed, wrote, and starred in. And the movie's fantastic if you haven't seen it yet. Kieran Culkin, who's in the movie and also fantastic, just won an Oscar for his role. But when I was watching the movie, I was really taken aback by Jesse's performance. Of course, Kieran is fantastic in the movie, and I'm so glad he won the award. He's magnetic, charismatic, just you want to be around him and watch him do his thing, which is a big part of the character. But Jesse's character was a lot more understated, and you might say something we've seen before from Jesse. Jesse Eisenberg is always kind of known for playing the anxious guy and maybe gets accused of being typecast or doing the same thing. But when I started reflecting back on his performances because of A Real Pain, I started realizing, yeah, he's playing the same type of character, but in different ways and finding different depth. Of course, there's The Social Network, one of his most famous movies, where he plays Mark Zuckerberg. In that movie, he's the anxious guy, but there's this darkness about him, the social outcast, the jealousy, the seething of it. Yeah, he's anxious, but there's a hint of menace a little bit, but also somewhat empathetic.
You have part of my attention. You have the minimum amount. The rest of my attention is back at the offices of Facebook, where my colleagues and I are doing things that no one in this room, including and especially your clients, are intellectually or creatively capable of doing. Did I adequately answer your condescending question?
One of my favorite of his movies is The End of Tour, where he plays a writer who's tasked with interviewing David Foster Wallace. And his anxiety comes through more in jealousy. He wishes he could be a writer like David Foster Wallace and feels inadequate. And his anxiety comes from this deep place of just coveting, wishing he could be something that he's not. Adventureland is another great one where he really captures that adolescent anxiety, that trying to fit in anxiety, that I wish she would talk to me type of anxiety that is just too relatable, at least for me. And then that brings us to A Real Pain, which I think is maybe his best performance yet. He has a powerful monologue at a dinner table scene where he just kind of spills and confronts this fact that he knows he's not like his cousin, that he can't be like his cousin, that he has to deal with his anxiety in different ways.
Isn't everyone in pain in some way? I mean, look at what happened to our families. Look at where we came from. I mean, who isn't wrought?
Well, you seem okay.
I'm not, though. I'm not. I just, take a pill for my fucking OCD, and I jog, and I meditate, and I go to work in the morning, and I, come home at the end of the day, and I, move forward, because I know that my pain is unexceptional, so I don't feel the need to, I don't know, burden everybody with it,
Yeah.
And the performance is so understated. I can understand why I wouldn't get as much of the award notice as, say, Kieran's performance, which again was fantastic. But it's these subtleties that I really think speaks to what makes the farmer so great. Which of course brings me to the last farmer, which is actually a farmer, Wendell Berry. I've recently gotten to his work, specifically this book, The World Ending Fire, which collects some of his essays. Wendell writes about agrarian life. In the first essay of the book, he talks about being at NYU early in his career and being on this trajectory to be a great writer, to being in the literary world. But he feels called to moving back home to Kentucky, to where he grew up. And everyone around him is telling him, dude, don't do that. You're sacrificing your career. You can never go home again. It's not going to be the same. You're not going to find your answers there. And he basically ignores them, and it's to his great benefit. He literally moves back to Kentucky, buys a farm, and becomes a farmer, and has an illustrious career, still going till today. He's about 90 years old now and is still writing books, which is a total inspiration. But he speaks to this idea of continuing to find inspiration in the same place. Of course, there's a lot of farming metaphors. I've learned so much about farming that is pretty funny for someone who lives in the city like myself. But in the essays, he keeps coming back to this theme that there's always something new to be found. He goes on a nature walk every Sunday and writes a poem. And even going down the same trails, the same woods he's been going to since he was a kid, we're talking 90 years, he's always finding something new. It's easy to take for granted the things that are right around us, that, oh yeah, I already know this place. I know my neighborhood block as well as anybody. But there's probably stuff we're missing. Little things, but those little things can carry so much inspiration. And that to me is what being an artistic farmer is all about. There's so much inspiration we can find by looking at what's directly around us, by digging deeper into a sound, an idea, a thought that is speaking to us. Don't be afraid of treading the same ground again and again. It might sound monotonous, but each time you might find something new. I have a lot more thoughts about this, and if you want to read them, you can go check out my newsletter on Substack called Another Thought. You can also find it at the link in my bio.